Do 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 do. Chop a doo beep ba boo pow doo do. Biddly doo dee dow. Scat chow pa ka ka brackety doo dow. Everything's going great, except it isn't. Let's talk. This might end up being an episode of firsts. I mean, I didn't just start out by scatting for some reason. You never know what I'm going to do when I step in front of the microphone. So, in light of that, let's start out with thanking everyone for joining us here on the Trent Takes On podcast. Trent Takes On 2.0, I guess is technically the name of it. Why do I call it 2.0? There was actually a Trent Takes On with no numbers after it, which was the original incarnation of the show. It ran for like, I don't remember, 100 episodes, something like that. And I did a lot. And then the Dobbs decision came out, and I kind of lost my mind on the pod and said, this is bad for my health. Because I think I had a little like mini episode there. Whoa. The Dobbs decision really upset me because it dealt with something that people weren't like grasping. And that was the allowance of the states to determine bodily autonomy, which I didn't think was a good road to travel down. And so I bring this up because that's what this episode's going to be about. Not the Dobbs decision, but about the road that we've gone down since the Dobbs decision and what we seem to be forgetting about the basics of America. And I want to do a thing on the Bill of Rights. I actually ran a dry run of this yesterday during dinner with my lovely partner. And I had like a little 10-minute explanation of what the Bill of Rights does and how dangerous the footing is that we're all on right now in regards to that very Bill of Rights. And then later on in the evening, I watched the A Block for Lawrence O'Donnell, who is an MSNBC contributor or host. He does a show nightly. He was my mom's favorite. She absolutely loved Lawrence O'Donnell. He's a former staffer for the Senate. He worked as a staffer in the Senate for a long time, and he was a consultant on The West Wing, which was one of my favorite TV shows because I thought it was very aspirational, and I like aspirational stuff. So I was watching Lawrence O'Donnell, and he actually did a bit on the Bill of Rights, and I was like, oh my gosh, wow, I must have my finger on the pulse or something. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bill of Rights today, and I think the reason that I really want to do it, I know the reason that I really want to do it is that there's people who just don't understand. We as a whole, a society, this entire country has taken for granted a whole lot of freedoms that have been afforded us that now that they're being chipped away at, not even chipped, just gouged at now, that we really need to pay attention. It's been pointed out many, many times over the last little bit. Donald Trump's obsession with tariffs is just, it's like it's so, people just haven't wrapped their brain around this. In the 18th century, before this was a country, we fought a revolution to become a country. And one of the opening salvos was over a tariff on tea. The Boston Tea Party was about tariffs. It was about forcing people to pay a tax that they had no part of the implementation of, and they got no benefit from. So people were pissed, and tariffs haven't gotten more popular over time. With good reason. Turns out that they're just a tax on the working class. But it's like we've forgotten the things that work for us. We've ignored them. We haven't given the democracy that we run its proper hygiene. I think democracies need some hygiene from time to time. I think that we needed to clean up our ethics laws, for example. We needed to realize that term limits in Congress were a good idea. We've got term limits for the president. Why don't we have term limits for Congress too? So that we can't allow these people to just be career politicians. They need to work for their constituents, be in service to their constituents, be in service to their country, their state, their community, and then hand that off to the next generations. And I cannot stress how important it is that the lion's share of representatives of a country should be from the biggest generations in the country. That which generations are currently, making up the most of this country? It's millennials and Gen X, and we very, 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 very little representation of millennials in the Congress, and that's not okay. We don't have a whole lot of Gen X in the well, we do. It's not all good. I think Gen X is the most confused. We're the most confused generation out there. I'm right in the center of Gen X. There's still a lot of boomers out there. Dick Durbin's talking about doing another term, and he's like 80. Chuck Grassley's still in the Congress or still in the Senate. He's 89. I think he's 89. There's still a lot of boomers out there. Mitch McConnell's finally retiring. That's cool. But democracy, this constitutional democracy that we have needs, it needs some hygiene every once in a while. And we just haven't done that. In fact, when you look back at the original framers, Madison, Jay, Hamilton, they were saying things like James Madison was he was completely sold on the fact that they would just basically rewrite this constitution every 3 generations. That you would have to make so many amendments that you would have to change it so much to add things to it that every, 60 years or so, you would have to just kind of start over. But we never did that. Not once. We've amended the Constitution 27 times, and the first 10 were part of the initial ratification in 1791. So anyway, we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights real quick, and it doesn't take long. I just use the oh my gosh, my sister's calling me, so I guess I have to take this. Hold on, please. So through the magic of editing, 3 hours later, I'm back. That was the longest and probably the best convo I've had with my sister in ages. Just catching up. We haven't spoken in a while, so it was nice to hear from her. Hi, sis. I won't share too much about my sister on the pod because privacy and all. Nobody knows how much you can share about anybody these days. But my sister's a really good person. Her heart's in the right place. And she sometimes has had a tough go of it, but she's turning things around and doing well. And I'm really happy for her. So thanks for calling, sis. I look forward to talking to you again. Now, I was talking about the Bill of Rights before I left on that phone call, and where I get my info from. Let's bring it up real quick. I use the National Archives. Archives.gov, which has basically all of the, it's like everything that the government has public is right here. So I'm going to read from the Bill of Rights real quick, and we're going to talk about each one in turn. And I'm going to skip number 1 till the end. Okay, so we're going to start with number 2, go through 10, and then we'll button hook around for number 1. So amendment number 2, that's the one about guns. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I tell you, the gun nuts love this one, don't you? The gun crazies just love this. They don't care about the well-regulated militia thing, because that's apparently not important. Being necessary to the security of a free state. Again, when the original Constitution was written, there was no standing military in the United States. We didn't have a standing army. We didn't have an army of readiness. We were going to defend ourselves using militias, using people, as opposed to having professional soldiers. So now we have professional soldiers to keep this. Anyway, Second Amendment, there are absolutists out there that say that means I can have any gun I want. It's not, but details. The Third Amendment is about quartering soldiers in the house during time of war. And this very much is an 18th century problem. We don't really get forced to quarter a bunch of soldiers these days. So the Third Amendment, not a big deal anymore. But basically, you don't have to put up with soldiers living in your home without your consent. The Fourth Amendment. This is a good one. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So the law enforcement of this country cannot just barge into your house and start searching for stuff without a warrant. And you can't obtain a warrant without probable cause to find that thing. Basically, this is no illegal search and seizures. They can't just take your stuff. The Fifth Amendment. This one's really famous, because we always hear about these bad boys pleading the Fifth. I'm going to plead the Fifth. That means they're going to take their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. But that's not all that's in the Fifth Amendment. So no person, this is the most important part is the very beginning. No person. Does that mean citizen? Or does it mean person? No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases. So basically, you can't be charged randomly. It means you have to be indicted by a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces. Basically, in the case of a military trial, those trials happen in the military. And then the next part, here you go. No person shall be the subject. No person be subject for the same offense to be twice in jeopardy. So you can't be tried for the same crime twice. The old double jeopardy rule. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. That's the pleading of the Fifth. So you don't have to incriminate yourself. And then here's the last part. This is the good part. Nor to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Basically, this keeps the government from stealing your stuff or imprisoning you or taking away your freedoms without due process of law. The whole system. That's what this is all built around. And that's a really important one. It's important these days because due process is supposed to be given to everyone. It says right there at the beginning, no person shall be held to blah, 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 blah. And this is all it's all one sentence. That's no person. Good times. Sixth Amendment, fair and speedy trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. And people get to be confronted with the witnesses against them and to have a compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. This one's come up quite a bit recently as well. The Sixth Amendment is being violated by every one of these executive orders from President Trump where he says this certain law firm is being singled out for whatever their crime was, which is usually just like taking a case where they sued the Trump presidency before or the Trump organization or whatever, or say they did work on behalf of Democrats. He's targeting these law firms. Well, that's absolutely against the Sixth Amendment, which allows people to obtain counsel and basically sets up the entire legal system as we know it basically you don't want a bunch of lawyers on the same team fighting for both sides. You need an adversarial court system. This person can't play for both teams at the same time. And Donald Trump wants to soak up all of these law firms into working on behalf of the government, or they don't get to work at all, which is just not you. The government doesn't get to say who law firms take as clients. That's basically what the Sixth Amendment, part of the Sixth Amendment. Anyway, Seventh Amendment, in suits, this is one of the funnier ones, in a suit of common law where the value of controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. In other words, if in any civil dispute with more than $20 at stake, you get a trial. Well, it's offered to you, including a jury and everything. Amendment 8. This is an important one right now. One short sentence. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Like being flown to El Salvador, a place that you've never been, and thrown into a supermax prison. For what? Don't know. Cruel and unusual, without question. Easy violation. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel or unusual punishments inflicted. That's the whole thing. Who does it apply to? Everyone. Every person. That's the thing. Amendment 9. Enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. In other words, there are more rights than we list here. The unenumerated rights. A lot of those. There's a lot of those. Like freedom of movement, for example. You're free to live anywhere in the United States you want. That's one of those Ninth Amendment things. Like, I was born in another state and now I live in California. That's perfectly legal. That's within my right. The 10th Amendment, powers delegated to the United States. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. This is the Federalist thing where the states' rights, everybody talks about states' rights. All the conservatives talk about states' rights. And they were really big on states' rights when it came to things like abortion. But now they're not really into states' rights. Now that Republicans are in charge of everything, they don't think that the state should be able to do whatever they want. They think that the state should be able to do nothing unless the federal government tells them to. So it's a real tricky situation depending on who's in charge, whether or not we actually have a 10th Amendment. You know what I mean? Like, So 10th Amendment, really important, but misunderstood, I think. So here we go. Amendment 1. I wanted to come back to this. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, meaning the Congress is not going to say the official religion of the United States is Christianity, for example, Catholicism. Could be anything. They're not allowed to do that. They're also, the next sentence, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In other words, you get to practice your religion or lack thereof, however you need to. And now the next part, or abridging the freedom of speech. In other words, we get to say what we want to say. Now, that's not absolute. Harmful speech is still not allowed. You cannot hurt others with your words. You cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. Or of the press. Yeah, that's right. Freedom of the press is right there in the First Amendment. Or the right of the people to peaceably assemble. There it is right there. The right of the people to peaceably assemble is very important. We're allowed to get together and speak our mind. And to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's an important one. It's an important part of it. Petition the government for a redress of grievances. That could mean pretty much anything. We're allowed to bring whatever grievances we have against the government, so long as it's in petition form, basically. We get to say things that other countries don't get to say. Other countries don't have a freedom of speech. They don't have a freedom of assembly, and we take that for granted. One of the problems that we have right now in the United States is that the Trump's fascist regime is attempting to take those rights away. They're targeting individual law firms. They're targeting individual people. They're targeting for deportation people who exercise their First Amendment rights. And keep in mind, it doesn't say citizen anywhere in that. When you stand on the soil of the United States, you are subject to all of the laws of the United States as passed by our government, passed by our Congress, signed into law by our presidents, and by extension the states, same deal, passed by state governments, signed into law by governors. If you stand on the soil of this country, you are subject to those laws. You are subject to those laws, but you also have the exact same protections as citizens, regardless of your citizenship status. So if you want to deport someone for being here undocumented, they keep using the word illegally, but it's not really illegal. It's a violation of a civil law, and that's why deportation is an option as punishment. If it were a criminal law, and therefore subject to the word illegal, if it were a criminal law, the punishment would be imprisonment or fining. Basically, we can fine you monies, property, take away your property, or we can imprison you. Those are the two options for criminal violations. Now, if you are an undocumented immigrant into this country, you can be deported. Yes, you can. That is on the table as an option because it's a civil crime. But that has to be adjudicated in an immigration court, whereupon you will receive a deportation order. And if you get a deportation order placed on you as a person, then you will be deported to your country of origin. That's how it works. Now, what the Trump regime, I almost said it again. What the Trump regime is doing is illegal, blatantly so. They're using something called the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which is a wartime law that allows you to deport people who, during a time of war, who are basically a threat to the country. We're not at war with anyone. they're claiming that the Tren de Aragua gang, Venezuelan gang, is in cahoots with the Venezuelan government and that they have infiltrated the United States and are creating havoc, or I forget exactly what the mention was, but it's hogwash. It's just hogwash. And beyond that, they're not even, they're just claiming that these Venezuelans are members of this gang and then deporting them without giving them due process. And their reasoning for deportation has been things like tattoos, whereas Tren de Aragua does not utilize tattoos to show membership in the gang. You don't have to get a tattoo to become a member of Tren de Aragua, according to people who have studied the gang and written about the gang. It is nefarious at best to allow this particular executive regime to be the ones who are the arbiters of whether or not you are a gang member and whether or not you should be deported for that reason. And it's not really deportation when they're not taking you to your home country, when they're taking you to a supermax prison in a third country that these people have never been to. According to very good reporting by 60 Minutes and other sources, as many as 90% of the Venezuelans deported to this supermax prison have no criminal records. And the ties to Tren de Aragua are tenuous at best. So it's really kind of an ugly lack of due process. And due process is a freedom that we have that we take for granted because we don't use it all the time. You don't use your rights to due process unless you are accused of a crime in this country. And when you're accused of a crime, you get to face your accusers. You get to hear the evidence presented against you at a court. You get a trial by a jury of your peers, overseen by a judge or magistrate, as they are called in the UK. I just like using the word magistrate for the record. You get that trial will be overseen by an impartial judge who basically makes sure that everybody follows the rules. And that's how due process works. Everything from the way you're arrested to the way your trial runs, to the way the punishment is doled out at the end, or the way the charges are dismissed. All that's due process. Now, the regime is claiming that if you offered due process to everyone, well, it would take too long. Tough shit. Everyone gets due process or nobody gets due process. See, that's the thing. The instant that you start making the determination who gets due process and who doesn't, that puts you in a position where you can deport absolutely anybody. And that's not deporting, for the record. When you remove someone from the United States without court order and take them to a third country, that is kidnapping and human trafficking. And eventually state AGs, Attorney General, will get onto this. And the response from the regime is, well, you don't want murderers and rapists running around in this country, so we're deporting them. Okay, fair enough. But you still have to prove that they're murderers and rapists. You can't we're not going to take your word for it. That's how the Bill of Rights works. That's how the Constitution works. You have to prove it. We take a lot of our rights for granted. Like I mentioned, that right of freedom of movement for granted. You get to go wherever you want. If you live in California, I live in California right now, and I want to go to Vegas for the weekend, I don't have to get any special papers or anything. I can just drive to Vegas, be in Vegas for the weekend, turn around, and come back. And I've broken no rules. In fact, Vegas is built on that. You can move from state to state, from place to place, without needing any prior approval. It's totally unnecessary. Freedom of movement. Some states, after enacting abortion bans, attempted to enact travel bans to say that pregnant women in their states where abortion is illegal could not travel to other places to have abortion care, which is a pretty clear violation of our right to travel interstate. Freedom of movement. It's the Ninth Amendment thing. Freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom of the press. The Trump regime banned the Associated Press from covering the White House, saying that they couldn't have a reporter inside the White House because they refused to acknowledge the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Well, the Associated Press operates in like 70-odd countries around the world. And the only country in the world that refers to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America now is this one. Now, the Gulf of Mexico, which is what I'm going to continue to call it, is not owned by the United States of America. And in fact, when it was named the Gulf of Mexico, the entirety of the surrounding land of the Gulf was owned by, you guessed it, Mexico. And that's where it gets its name. So the AP was banned from covering the White House because they refuse to call something what the dictator-in-chief says he wants it called. Is that fair? Is that a violation of the freedom of press? Absolutely. It is absolutely a violation of the freedom of press. The White House does not belong to Donald Trump. The press room does not belong to Donald Trump. The podium that they stand behind, the microphone that they speak into, those things do not belong to Donald Trump and the regime. They belong to us, the people. And the people's eyes and ears are members of the press. The founding fathers knew that, and they knew that if a government was allowed to control the press, then the people would not have the truth. Now, the AP thing is just one thing. This last weekend, CBS on 60 Minutes ran two stories, one on Tren de Aragua and the El Salvadorian prison, and the fact that we deported a bunch of people claiming that they were Tren de Aragua and violent criminals to this prison, and 90% of them had no criminal record. And the other was about Vladimir Zelensky and the Ukrainians and their war against Russia and the problems that they've had since Donald Trump was installed as president here. And Donald Trump found it very unflattering. And he had his Federal Communications Commission chair threaten to revoke their license for unflattering coverage of the Trump regime. Clear violation of the freedom of press. These are true stories. This is real news that they don't want people to hear, claiming that these were false stories, that they were slanted stories. Well, I hate to tell you this, but Fox News has been doing that shit since 1996, and they ain't never been threatened to have their license yanked. So, shenanigans abound. How about Donald Trump trying to control what colleges and universities can do, what they can teach, who they can hire, who they can admit? They're blackmailing colleges and universities by withholding federal funds, which, by the way, illegal. Congress appropriated those funds. His job is to disperse those funds, not to determine whether or not he agrees with whether or not those funds should be dispersed. They take away the money, the federal grant money to fund the scientific and medical research of these individual colleges and universities because he doesn't agree with them. That's something, isn't it? That scientific and medical research is what's responsible for things like the internet. It's what's responsible for most of the drug breakthroughs in the United States. So like 90% of them are done. 90% of the drugs that are developed in the United States are first developed in colleges and universities. Why? Because private industry doesn't want to devote a whole bunch of money to research and development because you're funding a lot of dead ends. So the United States government does it. We do it because we need those things. We need those advancements. We need that science. National Institute of Health grants are important. They've stopped them. This is bad all around. We're being hijacked and our expertise is being stolen by a regime that doesn't understand the value of it. They see all of these things as costs. They're numbers. They don't care that the drugs that they're being delivered that are being researched, the diseases that are being researched could lead to breakthroughs in treatment and cures that could stop things like cancers, like Parkinson's disease, like Alzheimer's disease, that we could have serious advancements in the treatment of diabetes, obesity, heart disease. It doesn't matter to them. They see them as costs. It doesn't matter that this research will save countless lives because they will eventually be successful, just like they were successful in developing the mRNA vaccine that we were able to use to halt COVID-19's deadly swath through our world that cost over 6 million lives worldwide and over 1 million right here in the United States. That research was funded by the United States government, NIH grants. It's strange, isn't it? How quickly we forget. We take our rights for granted because they don't come up very often. It doesn't come up very often. But every once in a while it does come up, and it's in those times when you really, really appreciate them. I believe the band was Cinderella, released a song back in the 80s. You don't know what you got till it's gone. We've had a really successful run of self-determinant governance where people decided who our representatives were, and those representatives operated in a system of checks and balances that kept anyone from getting too far out over their skis. It happens every once in a while. We've had hiccups. We've had bad times in the road. You would think that 250 years in, we would have ironed most of those out and realized that a system of checks and balances actually works in the long run. But it doesn't work if it's done in bad faith. It doesn't work if people take their oath of office to mean nothing, like the current Republican Party, for example. You're supposed to uphold the laws of the to uphold the laws of the United States and the Constitution. Faithfully execute the laws. What this administration does is break the laws. All of them, a lot of them, many of them. Unconstitutional executive orders left, right, and center. I sat there and listened to Donald Trump tell the governor of Maine that he is the federal law and that she needed to obey the federal law or he would yank federal funding for the state of Maine. That lawsuit got filed yesterday. They are suing the state of Maine for not instituting a transgender ban in college, or was it college sports? I think it was college sports. There are how many transgender athletes in the state of Maine? Anyone like to take a guess? I'll give you a hint. The answer is 2. They're suing because there's 2 transgender athletes who endanger the safety of the female athletes in the state of Maine. Really? I, for one, as a sports fan, have noticed that not everyone is the same. Not every person is the same. Not every man is the same size. Not every woman is the same size. I like to watch like the Olympics. It's always interesting stuff. Always amazing stuff. These are the best athletes, the best of the best. They're amazing. Some of them are very large, very scary, very powerful. Some of them are very small and very fast. They compete on the same fields. They compete in the same volleyball games. They run the same events in the track and field. People come in different shapes and sizes. Is this really about the safety of those athletes? Because are we going to institute, I don't know, say a weight limit in basketball? Only women who weigh between 100 and 170 pounds can play basketball. Is that what we're going to do? Because that's not the case. Some of the most dominant basketball players of all time have been just exceptionally large humans. And large humans can hurt other humans. Well, they can. It's not really the point of the game, though, is it? Do you really care about the safety of athletes when you embrace mixed martial arts? Just asking. Just asking. The most popular sport in the United States is American football. American football, where men can weigh as little as 150 pounds and as much as 350 pounds, crashing into each other at top speed. Head injuries are commonplace, not to mention the damage you do to your joints, broken bones, bruises, internal bleeding. Oh, American football is brutal, but I don't see you caring about that. So is it really about athlete safety? Or is it an ongoing war on the transgender population who deserve the same protections as every other person in this country? Don't like it? Tough shit. You're allowed to be who you are. They should be allowed to be who they are. But what do I know? I'm just a dude who can read. Well, I think that's going to do it for me today. I do have some extra time left in my little, billing cycle. So I'm going to throw a couple of classic Trent Takes Ons in, well, maybe just one. I don't know how much room I'm going to have. Between now and next Tuesday when my cycle runs up, because I'm not going to record another episode by then. So I'm going to throw Trent Takes On Classic at you, maybe 2 if I can find a couple of short ones. And so we'll just kind of maximize the amount of time I can spend with you. And I may even do a little bit of intro for that. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? In the meantime, thank you all so very much for coming with me on this journey. I am actually going to edit this episode, not a ton, but I'm going to go through, I'm going to clip out some stuff. Not some content, but some like breaks and ums and ha's and things that I say all the time that I probably shouldn't. Ha ha! Yes. And that'll be good too. A little editing probably go a long way on this one because it was really wordy. I do appreciate all of you for hanging in there through the whole thing. I love and respect every single one of you. Please share this with a friend. Say, hey, Trent is a little bit crazy, but by God, he makes a whole lot of sense. You don't have to say that if you don't want to. Freedom of speech and all, but it would be really cool if you did. I should have done that as Matthew McConaughey. Thank you one last time. Until we meet again, be good humans. It's the least we can do. And I'll talk to you soon. Love you.